So immediately upon seeing that title, I can already see your unconstructive rage bait comments being formed in the corners of my very mind. So I'd like you to calm down, take a deep breath, and just listen to me for a second, okay? Perhaps you can come to your own non-emotional, rational conclusion. Actually, it's the DBD community. It's not gonna happen. I'll just say it how it is. So yes, SWF is cheating in Dead by Daylight. And yes, I know, it's not bannable and shouldn't be bannable for the record. So how is it cheating, then you say? Well, essentially the Too Long Didn't Watch is, it is so game-breaking and stupid it falls under every possible category for what could be considered a cheat in a multiplayer PvP game. It's a third-party tool that gives you an in-game advantage that cannot be replicated by anything within the game. Allow me to explain. So starting off, for the very new players watching, what is SWF? This will be brief, I promise. But SWF does not stand for single white female. It instead stands for Survive with Friends. It essentially means just playing Survivor with your friends in a pre-made group. And it's called that because when the option was added to the game, it was called Survive with Friends. Because reminder, DBD on launch and for a few months afterwards did not let you even queue with your friends. The only way to do that was to queue up at the same time and hope you get into the same lobby. Essentially every match was solo queue, and that's how the game has been balanced for the past 9 years. Even the most diehard SWF apologists will admit that Survivor and DBD was never balanced around having comms, which fundamentally breaks the game in a way that can easily be compared to cheating, and it's not as crazy as you think. Now, to start off, what is my definition of cheating? Cheating is using a third-party software or individual that gives you a heavily one-sided in-game advantage and cannot be obtained within the confines of the game, or without a massive opportunity cost like running aura perks, which are uncomparable for the amount of info you get in a SWF that was never actually intended. Early perks like Bond and Empathy are just irrelevant in a SWF. Let me actually run it over really quickly. Being in a competent SWF gives you Base Kit Alert, Better Together, Bond, Boon Illumination, Clairvoyance, Counterforce partly, Dark Sense, Deja Vu partly, Detective's Hunch, Empathetic Connection partly, Empathy, Eyes of Belmont, Fogwise, Inner Focus, Invocation, Treacherous Crows, without the massive time investment or injuring yourself permanently, Kindred, Lucky Star partly, Object of Obsession with no downside, Open-Handed, Plunderer's Instinct partly, Premonition, Rookie Spirit, Small Game, Still Sight, Troubleshooter, Visionary, Wiretap, as well as the item effects of the map and the rainbow map, as well as multiple add-ons for the key. Okay, and wait, calm down, you're emotional, I get it, calm down. Before you get your what the hell is bro saying, bro, this must be rage bait, bro, what the fuck, bro, Spook and Jukes cooked you, bro. I know, I get it, I know this isn't 100% true for all these options. You cannot perfectly communicate the exact pixel location of every chest on the map with plunderers, or exactly where the killer is with alert, but despite the minor hyperbole, just think about that for a second. Why is wall hacking the info of a killer's whereabouts something that's bannable, but having the exact same info relayed to you over Discord is completely fine? The direct parallel is something you people can never figure out, and I have yet to hear a good argument disproving this. And I know you're gonna say though, well, having the killer's constant pixel location with wall hacks is nowhere near comparable to comms and having a good idea of where the killer is, right? And that's fair, but let me ask you, would you consider using a third-party software to give yourself a 200% speed boost cheating? Well, yeah, obviously. That's blatant cheating. Now, let me ask you, would you consider using a third-party software to give yourself a 2% speed boost cheating? Well, you're still using a software to give yourself an in-game advantage that cannot be replicated, right? Regardless of the severity, it's still cheating the same way that getting less info compared to wall hacks is still getting info using a third-party software. When the game launched with no SWF options, perks like Bond and Empathy were created specifically to help survivors locate each other, because the game was never built to have fucking clock callouts for SWFs to use and call out the exact location and IP address of the fresh installed trapper while their teeth are bleeding and their bodies are drenched in sweat. But okay, the odd perk here and there is invalidated by SWF. It's no big deal, right? Wrong. There's so much more to it. Just think about it for a second. Do you know how much of an advantage it is, I dare say a cheat-like advantage it is, for someone in your ears to constantly be telling you every 3 seconds into the match, okay dude, it's an Oni and he's coming to Shack, start pre-running 20 seconds early to waste a shit ton of his time while we all AFK on gens? Like, I wish I could have someone following the survivors around and telling me where they are with constant risk-free info. The closest comparison is stream sniping, I guess, but I don't even have to explain why that's nowhere near as consistent, right? Survivors having this level of coordination also allows them to use certain perks far better than they were ever intended to be used. Having a perk like Unbreakable is always better in SWF, because someone might come and pick you up wasting time, or play differently depending on if you don't have it. While running something like Kindred almost feels necessary in solo queue due to the amount of time your teammates will waste precious time both coming for a hook save. Being in a SWF on comms allows you to be much more efficient on how you play the match, just like someone with wall hacks would, aka too much extra info would. Remember in 2020 when Object of Obsession was really strong in SWF? Perks like this get gatekept by SWF the same way that perks like Awakened Awareness project get gatekept by Nurse? Why do you think we don't have a killer yet who can disguise and look like a survivor as one of their abilities? It sounds cool on paper, but SWF just ruins it like SWF ruins everything. Just being able to call out killer is on X side of the building, or a trapper placed a trap on this pallet, or I need a body block and an EMP at the main building, fundamentally breaks the game because it never was and still isn't balanced around the survivors having so much info. The thing is, the devs aren't going to do a thing about this because of course they aren't. It's plain stupid to ask them to ban people for playing with their friends. That's simply impossible, and they're a business after all. That would never work. So with all this whining, what's the solution? Well, I'll get into that later, but let me continue with my points that you won't pay attention to. In my Blight video, one of the comments I got is that Blight is one of the only killers who can consistently deal with a sweated out 4-man SWF, trying their absolute hardest doing clock callouts and a win streak, and I agree with you, I should have brought that up. Much like playing Blight, there's nothing inherently wrong with playing in SWF. I want to say that you should never feel bad for playing in a SWF. Solo queue is rough, we all know this, and I basically only play Survivor with friends when I do, and we calm too, just like everyone else. It feels like Blight to me where just simply being in a call with people I know are decent at the game and giving comms gives such a massive advantage, it is uncomparable, and you should never have an ego for winning in SWF. A lot of these high ego SWF players beating up on fresh install killers act like they're gods and have a massive power trip because they can pre-drop the 30 god pallets on the map while their team is just AFKing on gens, which entirely takes away the interaction from the game just like playing Blight does. These people who just brain dead pre-drop everything and pre-run the killer because they're constantly being updated on the position every 5 seconds don't actually learn how to play Survivor. They just learn how to play in a SWF and do gens without ever learning how to loot. They just boil down the game to a science and optimize the fun out of it just like the compies do, just so they can escape and get their Arby's gift cards. When you actually get a SWF zombie at a broken loop, they're always fucking terrible at the game because they only run meta shit and play in SWF, so they never actually learn. They're always just incredibly boosted, and yet they act like they're good still because they win most of their matches, because of course they do. And okay, so SWF is clearly problematic, but it's not cheating, right? I mean, the devs allow it. It's not breaking any rules. Isn't that how cheating works? Let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of legal versus moral? Sometimes YouTubers get away with completely heinous shit, but don't get legally punished because what they're doing isn't technically illegal or there's a loophole. They'll still end up getting shunned for it, but I don't know, man. It's not technically illegal, so who cares? They did nothing wrong. Might makes right, and breaking the fundamental basics of the game with constant information throughout the match using a source that's impossible to replicate outside the confines of the game is wrong, and we need to stop defending this shit and pretending it's okay. I'm not saying you're a bad person if you play in SWF because I constantly do. All you need to realize is how broken it is and not have a massive ego over it. These slaves who only play in SWF and pre-drop constantly downplay the advantage they're given and still play the victim card if the killer tunnels or something, despite tunneling being basically the only way to beat teams like this, especially on lower tier killers. They'll say shit like, you don't understand how hard it is to hold W versus Ghostface on Area of Crows, man. These toxic killers have it so easy. They're very disingenuous and they like to lie, because they only experience one side of the game and they want a power fantasy by playing the real power role of the game. These SWF zombies don't receive enough hate in my opinion. You can play something brain dead and broken and there's nothing truly wrong with that. Let people play however they want to, right? The problem arises for me when you play something as game breaking as a full man meta SWF hard calming and have a massive ego over it. These SWFs are always the one either saying it's easy in the endgame chat if you lose despite them having every advantage possible, or crying by the way you played or the kill you're playing if they lose every single time. They'll only ever say GG when they win and they'll cry when they lose because they're not used to losing. These people win like 5 games in a row and then when they finally get shit on by an actually good killer who's able to put up with all their brain dead bullshit, they throw a tantrum. This is a terrible way to play the game. One of my favorite examples is this night game I played a while back that I've already used as an example on this channel before, where this 4-man SWF quad rage quits at the beginning because they canceled their brain dead Azerov's key offering that they run every single game, and then they talked in the endgame chat like they weren't a SWF despite me checking their profile and seeing they were all friends. This is really cringe and embarrassing. It's such a circle jerk. They're pretending like they're not in a group. Survivors sometimes won't admit to being in a SWF even when they clearly are because they know how broken it is and they feel it takes away from their own solo mechanical skill, which it does, by the way. Like these guys who I owned as Pinhead recently and they denied being in a SWF despite all being on each other's friends lists. Stuff like this happens all the time. It's such a tragedy on this game that these high ego comptards can just autopilot the entire game because of how much information they have for free. Having 1,000 eyes on every corner of the map is the reason why nobody plays killers like Hag and we just get blights every other match, by the way. Even not being on comms throughout the match and just being in a pre-made group is problematic enough. Just knowing your teammate has Unbreakable so you don't have to pick them up, or knowing your teammate has Deliverance so you won't have to go for the save, makes these already powerful perks completely game breaking because they were never intended to be balanced around survivors having that information. Running over to your teammate with Unbreakable for 20 seconds only for them to get up, forcing you to run back to the gen you were on for 20 seconds is the equivalent of a commodious toolbox with its best add-ons. It actually just allows you to be so much more efficient because those 40 seconds that you just wasted are now 40 seconds of you sitting on a gen. This is a game-winning thing, by the way, and that's just one random example. Think about how many times you've won a match as killer from interrupting a gen with 95% progress. This has massive implications on the match, and being in a SWF with all the broken broken info allows you to act accordingly always. Try it for yourself. Think of different examples of the math behind Swift's efficiency and how game-breaking it truly is. In a game where the math is already rigged against you as killer, having the survivors this efficient just breaks it. The closest example I can think of is stream sniping, which is obviously not okay, but it's a funny double standard. Seeing the killer's build on Twitch isn't allowed, but just telling your friends their build on Discord is perfectly fine. Like, think about that for a second. And stream sniping as killer is nowhere near as consistent as playing in Swift, because you just have to hope you run into a Twitch slave and they don't have a delay on. Having that info as killer is the closest thing you can get to being in a Swift, and it's still barely comparable and completely reliant on factors outside of your control. Knowing what a killer has also lets you know what they don't have. If your Swift butt buddies have called out throughout the match that the killer has 3 perks and they just called out Bamboozle, then you don't have to worry about No Ed or No Way Out or None Are Free or Blood Warden or Remember Me or any of this shit. That has a huge change on the match, by the way. In a Swift, just knowing that you're going to Eyrie of Crows and your teammate will set up an uncounterable god boon on the top floor so the killer can never down you and you move faster is insanely game-breaking, but no one cares to talk about it. Statistically, Swifts have a fairly average escape rate, and the insufferable goblins of DBD Twitter made sure to let you know this. The reason for this is a lot of people playing in pre-made groups are just having fun with their friends and not abusing it like the players I've been talking about in this video. A lot of them are newer players messing around with their friends or just people trying to get their newer friends into the game, so obviously their escape rates are going to be very high, especially when Swifts are the most likely to play altruistic and ruin the game. It's the same thing with Nurse's kill rate being really low because she's mechanically weird. Does that mean that Nurse is fair and balanced? Just because something isn't being abused by you does not make it okay. Just because someone is really bad at Blight, that does not mean Blight is in an acceptable state. Just because you're drunk driving and haven't gotten into an accident doesn't mean the process of drunk driving is okay. It increases the likelihood of this bad thing happening. All in all, it's a pretty consistent example of cheating. Whether they want to just farm clips for fun despite having every possible advantage in the situation, or introduce a new friend to the game, it all comes down to you are not supposed to have this advantage and you are acting upon having this advantage. Okay, so if all of this is so problematic, how would I change it? Because you obviously can't make Swift bannable. That's just stupid. There'd be way too many false positives. I could end up making an entire video on this, but this is my quickfire solution. Add voice chat, or at least a pinging system, and then nerf Survivor as a whole in some way. Allow me to explain. The devs have been very against adding a voice chat to the game because the game isn't built for survivors to have that much information, and it may destroy the immersion a bit. I hate to break this to you guys, but DBD hasn't really been a truly immersive horror game since like maybe 2017. Having a voice chat would fix a lot of issues with your game and bridge the gap between solo queue and Swift. Why do you think all your killer games are so 0 to 100 nowadays with no in between? You either completely shit stomp the entire lobby and 12 hook them at 4 gens remaining, or fight for your life regardless of the outcome. It's because for experienced killer players like myself, Swift is basically the only way I can lose nowadays if I bring a good build and play a good enough killer. This is not what DBD should be. It shouldn't be this mathematic. There shouldn't be such a disparity between these two things. 4 good survivors in solo queue are far, far worse than 4 boosted as fuck survivors in a Swift, and it shouldn't be this way. Remember, the solo queue HUD didn't even exist until late 2022, and they're apparently going to be letting you see your teammates' perks in the pregame lobby too, so the devs clearly aren't against the idea. This would make the game so much more dynamic. It wouldn't be, oh, I loaded in as Clown with an off-meta build and it's a Swift, so I lose. There's literally nothing I can do. Or I loaded in as Blight with a full meta build and it's solo queue, so I just guaranteed win unless I hard throw. The game is so binary nowadays with this stuff, especially because of maps too, but that's a whole different issue. I have not heard an argument as to why DBD shouldn't have voice chat at this point, and I know it's not that simple to add, but after playing similar games to DBD like VHS that had voice chat, I think it would truly work. And wait, wouldn't giving voice chat to every survivor basically make every lobby into a discount Swift? Yes, it would. So that's why I propose that given all this new information, survivors have several perks need to be reworked, and Survivor as a whole should be nerfed somehow. How so exactly? Well, that's a video for another day, because it is such a complicated issue, but you can give me your ideas in the comments. I believe Survivor as a whole should be nerfed after these changes because it's not just like, hey guys, we buffed Wraith, it's the entire role. Killer as a role has much more nuance than Survivor, with all the selections, and some of these killers like Hag, Pinhead, Legion, or Twins are far weaker versus Swift due to the nature of their powers. I swear, the more I think about it, the more I realize how much Swift actually breaks basically every aspect of the game and nobody cares. Most people admit it's strong, but won't even admit it's the true power role of the game or even to the level of cheating. The more I think about it though, it really is cheating. Once again, you are using a third-party software to gain a massive advantage that cannot be obtained within the confines of the game. That is by definition cheating. The sentiment actually is not mine initially though. There's a semi-infamous Twitch streamer called Titan of the Mind who makes this kind of his whole thing that Swift is cheating. When I first heard it, I thought he was joking. Like, how could Swift be cheating? That's insane. But when I heard him go through his points, and full disclosure, called him myself many times, his perspective started to make a lot more sense. I haven't really heard a good counterpoint to this. It's usually the same bullshit like, what about pre-game trap, bro? Or it's not that bannable. It's not bannable though, which are easily debunkable. People even bring up other games like Overwatch, like, oh, is calming in that game cheating because you get so much info? When that game is clearly based around comms and it's symmetrical. They have voice chat in the game. It's such a bad argument. Swift being the way way it is in DBD for the past 9 years has led to so much complacency, but if we're gonna change camping, tunneling, and slugging, maybe throw the killers a bit of a bone here too, and try to fix the real power roll and the most broken thing in the game, maybe it's time to stop these power tripping losers. But yeah, that's about all I have to say on this topic. I'd love to see how this one goes over. I'm sure I'll hear great arguments as usual. Like, I know it's a bit of an out there take, but just use your brain for a second. Think about it. All right, yeah, it should go over well. It should go over well. Okay, yeah, okay, cool. All right, that's it.